Dear listeners of the Female Guides Requested podcast, happy Wednesday. This is your host Tintin from Las Vegas. Today we have a young and inspiring guest whose name is Soph Petros. I got to know her a little last summer when I taught an SPI course for the climbers of color. She was the assistant rock director of the organization and helped me with many tasks. She was thorough and excellent communicator, and her emails were always filled with loads of positive energy and humor. Soph is an AMGA SPI and a PSIA AASI certified Alpine ski instructor. She does rock guiding with climbers of color in Washington, out in the wild in Oregon, and Flash Foxy in California, and teaches skiing in Stevens Pass, Washington. She does admirable work in affinity space, providing safe and supportive learning environments. To quote her words, she is amped to join and lead affinity programming that not only brings communities together, but also challenges and questions systems and values of supremacy, domination, and oppression that manifest in climbing spaces, even diverse ones. In this episode, she recalled that her family always liked to play outside, even though the activities they chose were not technical recreation. The sense of connection to nature and the land was very impactful. We, of course, talk much about affinity programs. Soph shared valuable insights on how we could make the environment more inclusive, which would also help guides manage risks and provide better student experience. Beyond climbing and skiing, Soph can be found baking lots of bread, crying over just about every dog she sees, making jewelry, taking outdoor naps, eating really good pickles and hot sauces, and trying to make craft cocktails on her truck tailgate. Now, let's dive into this lighthearted yet serious conversation with Soph Petros. Welcome to the show, Female Guides Requested podcast.
Thank you for having me. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Is it? Thank you for listening too. And I want to interview you when I was in Pacific Northwest last summer, but couldn't really find a time. And you were busy. You were managing a lot of logistics of the Climbers of Color programs. So it's probably very hard to find time.
Yeah, summers are hard for me. It's nice to have the chill of the winter and thinking about how to have more time for myself this summer too, as I navigate guiding and personal climbing adventures as well.
Nice. And I found that I asked this question a lot, that Soph, can you pronounce your last name for me?
Yeah, Petros.
Petros.
Yeah.
Actually, yours is I think it's the easier one compared to a lot of people because, I have all sorts of people on my show and they all have very different last names. So I just kind of want to...
Soph throws everyone off. I get a lot of, is it Soph? Is it Sooth? And I was telling them, it's Sophia. I just chopped it in half.
So it's not really an official nickname for Sophia, right?
No, it's not really common. Sophie or Fee, but in college just started going by Soph.
Okay.
And it's kind of stuck to the point that I have a few friends who hear someone call me Sophia and they're like, I don't know a Sophia. And then they're like, Soph. And they're like, oh, you're talking about Soph. It just doesn't even register that it's the same person to them. So, yeah. Kind of evolution of the name, but you say Sophia and then people are like, oh, okay, I get it.
Great. Then I always know you're Soph. Actually, not until that I read your guiding resume, I just said, oh, it's actually from Sophia.
Yeah.
And thank you for sending that along to me, so I have a little bit of reference.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and then you mentioned that in the resume that you start guiding. So it's your guiding resume. Do you also have other resume? Do you do multiple jobs right now?
Yeah, people, I feel like a common question. People like, how many jobs do you have again? Um, so couple of different hats. I spend probably about half of my time doing guiding and outdoor instruction, and fill in the rest of that time doing operations and coaching for a small youth-led climate group. So I have a background in like climate campaigning, particularly around fossil fuel divestment and like anti-deforestation campaigns. So that's kind of how my academic background and organizing background and kind of what called me to go outside. I think in the first place and have some of those first experiences with technical recreation, and then decided that I really valued both of those things, and I'm trying to figure out how to build a career where I can do both. And in building a career, you can do both. You don't make a ton of money, so I also work as like a server and uh, in like a local like cocktail bar, which is probably where I actually make the most money. But trying to figure all of those things out. Yeah, so I started like guiding while I was in college, um, and I'm here since. Yeah.
So is that because you're in college, you have some sort of like outing club, outdoor program, or something like that?
Yeah, so I was a leader I went to Columbia. So I went to school in New York City, which is like not usually the first place people think guides and like outdoorsists are built. Um,
Well, I start
and
climbing in the dunks.
okay, yeah. So that was some of my first, that and the Central Park boulders were some of my first like outdoor climbing experiences. And I was a leader in it was called Co-op at the time, Columbia Outdoor Orientation Program. And we did short trips in river canoeing, backpacking, and like bike trips for incoming first year students. So it was all like led by upperclassmen, and it was kind of just happened before university orientation. It's an opportunity to meet other first years, get connected to upperclassmen, and kind of have some like mentors and resources like as you get into college. And that like social community and like training was a huge part of just like my college experience, and was the first time I took like a wilderness first aid class or saw what guiding could be. Um, as well as like just thinking through all of that and what it meant to get to school in a place like New York City and not know anybody and not know how to get around and not know how to navigate college, or like who are you going to invite to like, are you going to sit at lunch alone, and to have, or like what do you do when you sleep through a class, and to be a resource for first years, as like somebody that they knew, that they could feel connected to the university and to school when things were both fun and challenging. I think to me saw like the possibility for like building connections through guiding and like outdoor experiences. And also, I really valued that time outside of the city. Columbia's a very high pressure university, and so I ended up going and spending a lot of time outside as like ways to just kind of like de-stress from school and build those connections, and ended up in the summers going to Colorado and Wyoming to work after that. So working in like expedition, like backpacking for like middle school and high school groups. And those like 10 to 12 weeks, barely with my phone, like completely disconnected from kind of high pressure university stress, was basically just how I made money and how I like decompressed from the school year and like got ready for the next one, and made me pretty excited about if I could do that after college, and kind of split that life. I felt very lucky with the just the time off you have when you're in college, all that structure. So being able to take summers and winters to just like be outside and connect and like just build more skills.
I see. So you mean that when you were in the college, you participate in this program that will lead trips for uh, the newer generation, yeah,
Yep. So
and
incoming first years, yeah.
the coming freshmen, and then you also during your vacation time, you also found job to lead outdoor trips.
Yeah. So I started working mostly like middle school and high school, like backpacking trips, and those just running back to back for like three and a half months in the summer between semesters. And that's just kind of how I made money to like support myself in college and started building more skills and started meeting people who started talking to me about guiding as a career.
I see. And then you also mentioned that. So, what was your major again? Can you describe it again?
Yeah, I studied in American studies, so I studied American environmental history and education, and thought for a long time that I was going to be a teacher. So I was already thinking about education, and then thought a lot about what I could do with like instructing and guiding outside because of that. I thought I wanted to do environmental biology, and then realized what I liked about field biology was just being outside and less of the statistics. And so kind of did a pivot partway through college.
So then, but because of that study, you still have to go outside. But then you need to come back in front of the computer and doing your analysis and everything, right?
Yeah, and I think I just saw too with that I had skills that I felt like weren't really used, like when I was inside a lab setting or I was writing papers, and I felt like only other people with like a science background could read and understand them. And I had a summer at Rocky Mountain National Park where I was an education intern and worked on some field biology programs. And that was really exciting, but I noticed what an impact I could have, like talking to park visitors and leading programs versus writing science papers that I wasn't really sure if anyone was going to read. And got really interested in like public education around like the environment and climate, which kind of led into my other job pathway.
Then what brought you to Seattle? So right now you're based in Seattle, right?
Yeah. So now I'm based, I live just a little northeast of Seattle in a small town called Snohomish. And I initially came to Washington after living abroad in Chile. So my mom's family is from Chile. And after I graduated college, I was feeling like overwhelmed and kind of like disconnected with just like the pressure um, of going to school at Columbia and not really sure what I wanted to do next. And ended up getting a job but I knew that I wanted to travel, but I wanted to stay in one place for a while. So I got a job at a rural school in Chilean Patagonia. So forest and like Montessori school blend in a small town called Coyhaique, which is in the region of
I've been
Aysén.
to
And
Coyhaique.
you've been to Coyhaique? So I
Yeah.
lived there for a little, almost 2 years and spent the pandemic. So I graduated college in May 2019, did a summer season of backpacking and rock instructing in Colorado and Wyoming, and then moved my things into like a duffel bag and a backpack and flew to Coyhaique, like sight unseen. I'd never been to Chile. I'd never been to South America, but was just excited to kind of take some time to explore and connect, learn a little bit more about my mom's family, and hopefully have some time for some climbing. And I spent, yeah, just a really special time and like fell in love with the landscape of Aysén. And I had a vision in my head that I was going to go there for like a year and then I was just going to move to Colorado and that's what I was going to do. And being in Coyhaique and Aysén and being so close to the ocean, it made me realize that I love the ocean and my family. So like I shared, my mom's family is from Chile. Her mom's from Chile, her dad is from Greece, and my dad is from Haiti. And I was like, the people that I come from, they're near the ocean. Like, I need water. And after just being abroad during the pandemic was a little bit challenging. And people were like, I wanted to come back to the US. And people were like, have you thought about moving to Washington State? And I was like, yeah, I should move to Washington. So again, kind of sight unseen, moved um, to Western Washington in the spring of 2021, and then was splitting my time between Washington and Chile up until this year, where I am like spending my first full winter in Washington. And yeah, I'm starting to feel really settled in this area and just really in love with the Cascades and the sound and kind of all it has to offer and the way that it feels very familiar to some of the landscapes that I was in Aysén and in Coyhaique.
Oh, that made me wonder. So, where were you born and raised?
I was born in New York City
Oh, okay.
and then was kind of raised in like a 15-20 mile radius um, around between Queens and northern New Jersey, and then went back into the city for college. So not very far. Like I just kind of always spent a lot of my childhood in one place, and was eager and was also very scared about moving away for college. And so was very eager when I started to have those opportunities in college to travel more and just to see more of the US. I got some of those opportunities. So yeah, I had never been west of the Mississippi until I got my first job at Rocky Mountain and drove out to Colorado with my mom. And that was like really special. Just kind of opened my eyes up. I was like, wow, that some of the landscapes that I just could only have like dreamed about or had like seen out west, and that just kind of feeling really connected, um, like to big mountain spaces. And but that kind of came late in my life.
I kind of can relate because I was raised in a big city,
Hmm.
and so I didn't really get serious in any outdoor sport until like maybe like 20 something. So I wasn't,
Yeah.
so I'm like curious, like, did your family go camping when you were like young, or is mostly like more like city recreation stuff when you
Yeah.
were raised?
I think mostly city recreation. Like I just spent like most of my childhood with my mom and like any number of like New York City parks and a lot of time in very close by to where I grew up in Queens, Flushing Meadows. In Flushing Meadows, in Central Park, going to the zoo, going to museums, and that was kind of my connection with the outdoors. I think I came from a family that liked being outside. We loved barbecuing, and when I would go to my grandparents' house, my grandfather would kind of just close the door and tell the kids to like go get dirty and then come back when dinner was ready. Like that was our introduction and trying to keep up with my mom, like walking and hiking. Like I think my mom took us out, but I never came from a family that did any sort of technical recreation. So we didn't often go camping. We didn't go climbing or skiing or anything like that, but we went to the beach, we went to parks, we played outside, and I think I learned um, from an early age that that would be important. And as I started to get older and interested in those things, my mom started finding like resources in the community or family friends, or people who might be able to take me and my brother on some of those experiences and opportunities that we were looking for. I didn't really know what camping was until my brother's Boy Scout troop went. And then I got very angry because my Girl Scout troop, um, we couldn't do anything as cool as his Boy Scout troop. And I felt like they were going canoeing and camping and hiking. And that was probably, I think, the first time I realized I was like, that's possible. And I want to do that. And I'm a little upset that I can't. So ended up, it was more of a rebellious Girl Scout than I was a good one. But mostly because I wanted some of that kind of opportunity outside and didn't see it, but like knew it was there. And I think I just started looking for it in like middle school and high school.
That you said technical recreation. I mean, I understand what you meant, but I
Yeah.
seldom hear people using this term. So, was it an invention or?
Yeah, I have started making this distinction when I talk to people kind of like about the outdoors and my connection, because I think there is a narrative that people of color and kind of immigrant communities don't spend time outside, like the outdoors. Like I think we kind of code the outdoors as um, those things, like technical recreation that require like a technical skill set. And we kind of put more value on that as in terms of the way that we connect to the outside and nature. And that lives like that doesn't leave a lot of room for, I think, other ways that people connect to being outside that are maybe land-based practices or religious practices, or even just the simple act of like having a barbecue. Like that's a like barbecuing outside and just like being outside, or like walking as a family. Like those are outdoor experiences, but they don't require that extra skill set. And so I think we don't term them as like valid in a lot of ways in the outdoors. And I think I spent a lot of time distancing myself from the outdoors community because I felt like I didn't grow up quote unquote outdoorsy, but I did. I just didn't do technical outdoor recreation, but still spent a lot of my childhood like outside and playing. And I think it's an opportunity to kind of, especially working in people of color spaces, kind of call in like more culturally relevant opportunities that people have to like connect and be like, oh yeah, I have done an asada with my family. Like that is being outside, going hunting, going fishing. Yeah, like all of
Yeah.
the time I spent visiting my family, my dad's family in Haiti, like playing on the beach as a kid, like that was outdoorsy. It just, you know, I didn't buy the equipment to do that at REI, so it doesn't quote unquote count. And I see those things as really informative of what I want to do with like technical now that I, ski and climb and mountaineer, things that require like a technical skill set. I still see them as connected to the experiences I had as a kid or that I have with my family, that don't require that skill set.
Huh. Yeah, that's kind of interesting. So you are saying that in the language, a lot of some community when they say, "Oh, let's just go outside," they actually meant some technical
Yeah.
outside, not just outside.
Yeah. And I think we think that that's more the technical outside is like more valid. It's like a better way, quote unquote, better way to be outside. It's just a different way. It requires more skills. You experience everything differently, on a simple walk than you do mountaineering, but you still have a connection to nature and the outdoors. And I think that sometimes people forget that. And because we kind of understand outdoorsy just to mean something a little different that I think doesn't always include people's experiences. And I felt, especially in kind of college, really disconnected from outdoors culture and my family and kind of resentful as I started building more skills that I didn't have these experiences, these quote unquote experiences of skiing or climbing as a kid that I saw some of my peers have. And then I realized that I did have outdoor experiences that taught me, the value of being outside or conservation, or like just how fun it is to like play and like move my body outside. Like I still learned those things. I just didn't learn how to ski. And so it helped me come back to appreciation for the way that my parents had raised me.
I see. So then I'm curious, how does your family see you now that you're playing outside a lot technically?
Yeah. I think it's interesting. My brother is also like a big, like recreationalist, like big skier, big climber, big mountain biker. Definitely better at some of those things than me, and like learned as a adult as well. And so it's been cool to kind of grow that skill set with my brother. He is also a guide, and so just going on adventures as siblings now that we're adults has been really cool. Um, but sometimes it has like been hard to explain to my family. I think definitely my mom, she gets it in the way that she's like, "Are you happy?" That's usually the question that she asks, like, "Are you happy doing this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it makes me really happy. Like, learning to ski has made me really happy. This climbing adventure, climbing, she wants to find out after the fact. She doesn't want me to tell her I'm going climbing. She wants me to tell her that I went climbing, because she said it will stress her out, especially if I go with my brother. But I think it's not something that we do together, which is kind of different or novel. But it's something my brother and I do together, um, which has been a really cool evolution. Um, but for the most part, my family doesn't totally get it, but they appreciate all the like pretty pictures, and I think have always, ever since I was little, and we, barbecued and swam in the ocean and did all these things, like just wanted me to be happy and are like, okay, sounds like you're happy. And then have left it at that. Like that's really cool. And I think has been also something that I can share with my mom, who is young. It's actually my mom's birthday today. That we are able to like go hiking together. I like took her camping for the first time. We did her first time ever backpacking together, in Chile and like the Cochimo Valley. Like I think she has a sense of adventure and is like curious, and it's cool to have skills that I can now share with my mom to help her like experience like a different type of recreation than we're used to. But I also really value her coming to visit me and just spending a couple of hours like walking around the like wildlife preserve near my house. Like that also feels to me like really important. And I, but I don't do a lot. I don't really do any of these things with anyone but my brother. But that's been really cool to grow like our relationship. Just like coming back to realize your sibling is cool and not just like this little person that like you grew up with who was kind of annoying. You're like, oh, you grew into a really cool adult. And he's like, you grew into a really cool adult and let's hang out. And it's been really fun to like go climbing together and biking and plan like ski touring adventures like that. It's really, really special. And I think it's like helped us grow closer in adulthood. And so I'm really grateful that that is also something that we can share personally and professionally, like sharing tips and tricks and things that work for me as a guide and work for him in his context, which is pretty cool.
Wow, that's beautiful. I mean, at least your mom asked the right question that
Yeah.
whether you're happy to do that, and then she just wanted you to be happy.
Happy and then make sure I know what I'm doing. And I'm like, a couple bodies have certified me. They seem to know what I'm doing. They think I know enough. Which has also calmed her a lot more once I think I've never been a huge risk taker, but mom's worry. And I was like,
Right.
the American Mountain Guides Association says I could do at least this. And she's like, okay, cool. You know what you're talking about.
Nice. Your resume, a lot of trip that you did is with affinity group, right? Obviously, that's very important to you.
Yeah, I think for me, I just working in affinity spaces, that's often started as like I think like women's spaces and then evolved like I think as my own understanding of like my gender changed. I think my comfort in like women's spaces and spaces that are open to you have a different experience of gender other than like cis men and people of color spaces was really important to me because I think I very quickly um, realized that other people were going to make this matter for me as I pursued first climbing and then other sports. Less so that I was really thoughtful about seeking those out, but that I would have experiences in like dominant climbing culture that would make me kind of question my abilities or question my experiences. And that like I was always going to walk into those spaces and be read as like somebody who was in the minority. Um, I was not going to like walk in and be like comfortable beyond things about like socioeconomic status or class or just being new, like learning these things as like, 19, 20, 21, learned to ski when I was like 24. That all of those things would be more recent for me. I knew that that was going to kind of count against me. And I ended up having early in my climbing career, just like some pretty negative experiences around like just like gender and race and like felt like I was honestly ready to kind of hang up with the sport. I was like not interested in pursuing it. And it was because of affinity spaces, namely in New York, Brothers of Climbing and Brown Girls Climb, that I kind of stuck with the sport and became interested in seeking mentorship, growing my skills, more opportunities, um, and then realized that not only could I teach in a different way, I could also learn in another way. And I think once I realized that was possible, I became really committed to working in affinity spaces. Um, because I think for right now, affinity spaces are where people, guides and instructors and participants and students are asking and seeking to have a different experience than they're getting in dominant climbing, guiding, or instructing. I would love to see like mainstream climbing culture and guiding um, ask more questions about like why and how we recreate, who is included, how we create learning opportunities that like connect us to the land and to each other that are challenging, like dominance and like supremacy, and making sure that everyone can kind of show up and be their full self. And I think as I started to learn a lot more about risk management, I became really interested in thinking about all the social and emotional risk factors that affect our ability to like climb something hard or like ski, like do something challenging, and like, and that if I wanted to mitigate risk, and like, as I hope like almost all guides do, that I also need to think about the social and emotional risk factors that affect people, and my students. And I think affinity spaces right now are having those conversations and really looking to remove those barriers so that people can take on the objective risk of climbing, of skiing, of mountaineering, and feeling like their whole selves are here. Um, and so I'm kind of stuck with affinity guiding, for the most part. Like, have some opportunities that I think are amazing to work outside of affinity spaces. And yeah, maybe I can share more about that. But what I think has been really cool is like the feedback that I get when I go from an affinity space to a non-affinity space and I apply those same techniques and tactics. And people are like, wow, I felt really supported. Or like, I took a course once and no one had ever asked me this about, um, just like how I was feeling. Like, even something as simple as like, how are you feeling about this? Or like the patience. And I think seeing people really blossom when you respond to those things that are affecting their ability to like be present and like learn technical material, and honor like the whole person, that kind of, those approaches work for everybody. um I hope is something that I think we're beginning to see like more and more like guides and instructors start to focus on, because I do think that the approaches we've piloted, and I say we is like collected, like all like guides and guide services and instructors who are really committed to those things in the like general affinity space, especially in climbing, um, have pioneered tactics that you end up realizing kind of rising tide lifts all boats. Like, everyone wants to feel like a sense of belonging and a sense of safety. And if we could achieve those things, we could probably now take on objective hazard together and work better. So um, that's kind of a rambly answer, but it's been something that I've been thinking a lot about. Um, and I think it's where my skills are most needed. Especially in a moment where there are not a lot of like Black and like Afro Latino like guides and instructors like who are certified really in kind of and credentialed in any way in some of these industries. Like, I often find myself to be among the few and relatively young, and I know I have a lot to learn, but I think that I can have more impact staying in affinity programs and helping just like grow other people's leadership and like build those systems than I am to kind of go out into other guide services that are maybe not focused in affinity programs. And I don't know if I can have as good of an impact there. I'm excited about that, but I also know that I also feel better. Um, like, I come to work more happy and more fulfilled, when I'm in an affinity setting, because I also feel like I am getting that same level of like respect and thoughtfulness, that I am able to hope that I'm hopefully giving, to clients and participants. And I don't always feel that way when I'm working, in non-affinity spaces. And so I think also about what I want to like keep me working as long as possible, and that's a positive work environment. And I'm not sure that I can find that everywhere.
As you were saying that you work in an affinity space and then you work in a non-affinity space, they were amazing. They were just like, "Whoa, I like your approach." I totally agree. What you said is, it seems like every single person likes that. Then how come in a so-called traditional space that is lacking, and especially throughout this education, then we talk about risk management, and then the most obvious thing is always the physical risk. But certainly people talk about emotional risk and the social risk. And then I was wondering what is missing. It's not like people don't know this thing exists, but somehow it's, it seems like it's not addressed enough. So some organization, it seems like they were saying that they recognize that it's important, like some guy service, they recognize it's important to do some DI work. But then the people who are in charge, usually they were clueless. They it's not that they don't want to make good things happen, but they was just like they didn't know where to start. And so I was like wondering, like, where's the missing part? If they don't know where to start, what kind of questions should they ask? Or
Yeah.
who they should talk to, it's not like there's no affinity program exists in the space, so they could like learn from other organizations' experience. So how can we make these things a more common sense rather than just in the affinity space?
Yeah, absolutely. I do agree that there's this big disconnect between people saying like we all want this. Like we want positive outcomes for like guides and students. And then also like don't go through with it. And I think I was just thinking about what I wanted to share on the podcast today while I was skiing. I was like, "Oh, we're gonna meet today." And I was like on the lift sending a text and I was like, "Great, I'll ski and I'll organize some thoughts." Um and I think something that I think one is there's a real reluctance, I think, generally to maybe acknowledge that some of our like paragons in climbing and in guiding, so famous athletes, people who've like really set history, in terms of like accomplishments, new feats, kind of pushing the upper limits of the sport, like have themselves been engaged in a lot of behavior that is, I think we would refer at the time and now as racist and misogynist and exclusionary. And definitely when it comes to kind of land practices here in the US, really anti-Indigenous. And I think there's a real reluctance in any industry to kind of look closely at like heroes and paragons in the sport and maybe kind of tear down the idols. Like that's something that I think people don't often want to do. They want to imagine that those people were as awesome and as cool and as visionary as they were. And I think it's hard for people to, I think many people, particularly folks who really have identified with them or have seen those folks as mentors and as heroes, to question their legacy. So I think that's one, which I know I sometimes like, I don't want to question my heroes. And the second is I think that a lot of the instructional techniques and tactics that I think that are used in affinity spaces that are affinity spaces in trauma informed in spaces that are so successful are also have been really feminized, and I think they are seen as like quote unquote like women's work, like this idea that like a certain amount of like patience or explaining things different ways or kind of more emotional support for participants, like that is really kind of coded as like feminine and therefore like not worth our time or not worth building or learning. And I think we often devalue those things. So there's also this kind of understanding that it's like a worse way to do things. And audio medium, people that are listening, we're on Zoom and there's a weird Zoom balloon. I talk a lot with my hands. You can't hear that on a podcast, but I've triggered Zoom AI. They made some balloons. So I think that's one of the really big things is like this kind of just human tendency to like not reflect on who created the systems we're inheriting. And I think there's a lot of recent history and longer history in climbing that really inform some of these negative behaviors and practices, and a real desire to not want to question that. There is a view that a lot of the techniques that I think we could and should use to like promote better risk taking and like more inclusive guiding are devalued because they're associated with women for the most part. And then also a recognition that that would really shift to invest meaningfully, I think, in a new generation or like new approach of guides and instructors would really change the demographics of who currently has power and enjoys representation. Um, and I think that for a lot of people feels scary that this would mean empowering people with different perspectives and that on the whole are more people of color and more women and more gender nonconforming people and more queer folks and more folks of immigrant background. And I think that kind of demographic change um, is very alarming to people who are normally comforted by the fact that most people in the room look like them and just have not had to have the experience of like being in an all guide meeting and being, one of the only of anything and still expect to like be calm and feel at home. And so I think that's just like a real challenge across lots of industries, but especially ours, given the way that a lot of other factors like class and access get like compounded when you start doing things like climbing and mountaineering and skiing and who is good at that and who is good enough to guide that and who has been able to receive access to train that you get a smaller and smaller group that is more and more likely to probably feed into some of those behaviors than the general public. And so I think that also has made it really hard and it makes it I think there are awesome folks who are like listening to people that are doing affinity organizing and affinity guiding about what can and should look different. And I think there are some really cool guide services that are thinking about other ways because I'm seeing this trend, but I really struggle that it's not something that's happening like industry wide. And even as the leader in some of those affinity orgs, I struggle with like what it would take to happen at a larger level because I think it's something that needs to happen organically. I don't think forcing and shaming people to change actually builds the durable change that we want to see. It probably just gets people to say the right things, but not change like beliefs or actions. And I would like to see like more effective ways to make change. And I sometimes am challenged with how to get the broader climbing community and like guide world to understand, integrate those perspectives, just to improve the outcomes of the folks that are trying to learn. Maybe it'll just take like a wave of like there's so many new folks that are coming in as like guides and educators, and maybe it just takes some time for this all to like percolate and settle. But it's something I think about. I think about a lot.
Your position right now, you are the rock director for the climbers of color. So like any say service say approach say climber of color say, hey look, we are this small guy service or medium sized guy service, whatever size guy service. They're just like, hey, we recognize that's important to push DEIJ work, and we want to do that, but we have no clue. Like how do you think that you or me as a climber of color can give them like pretty good suggestions? Say, hey, look, this is what you can do already.
Yeah. I think one big thing is like investing in if we're thinking just about like folks of color, like anti-racist education and training for like all members of like leadership and guides that I think is relevant and applicable to our industry. So is yes about um the way that like race and racism affects life in at least we can say the United States. We're not talking in a more narrow context. But then also like how does the like what does that do in terms of showing effects in, the climbing and outdoor industries more broadly? Like, what does that look like? Being able to help like map and identify challenges at climbers of color. In some ways, we've identified even just like language, like we have policies and like a community developed language list of like common climbing slang and terminology that is like racist or otherwise harmful, that's been sourced by members of the community. And like one way that we practice this like in our courses is like to not use this language, and we like share it with our students, we share it with our guides, talking through alternatives to some of these harmful words. It's also like guide like development and education that's like culturally relevant. Is like, what are the meaningful opportunities to grow educators in this background that like can talk about shared experience, but also are like meeting those gaps. Because I do think that we're at a point too where like there are folks from all of these communities that are represented in leadership, or are very close or capable of being guides and instructors, and like need those resources. So encouraging folks to invest in their local communities, and the folks that are here and like need a certification and or need support passing an exam or paying for one, that I know can do that work, and thinking really about how to kind of share power. I have also gone through some really amazing trainings about just like trauma and stress risk in climbing too, that has given me some really, really great tools for thinking about like community resilience and being able to create a better environment in my courses for folks to respond and handle just the objective stress and hazard that comes with climbing, by being able to have techniques and strategies for creating more resilience. And I really credit Laura Saborin and Sarah Regan for running a training like that for climbing guides. And I know that they're piloting it, so I just wanted to give them a shout out, because I know that is also something that, looking more into these models, ways that we can improve that. And I think another thing too is like guides of color out here is like listening to and like seeking the expertise and like reflection of guides of color in a meaningful way. That isn't just kind of like a tokenizing, can also really help with the like inclusion of that program. And I've seen some really cool stuff. I was a inaugural member of like the Alpine Ascent International BIPOC Guide Development Program, and it was really cool to also just talk and share with their guide staff as well, just like what experiences being like a young guide of color are, and like aspirant guide, like what are those like barriers and challenges, and ideas to grow the program. And I think the program manager, Mary Brown's, done a really good job of integrating everyone in the cohort's feedback too, of what are those challenges, to kind of build a guide core that in the coming years will increasingly reflect just like the growing diversity in our sport.
Yeah, I actually have a conversation. Well, I did an interview with Mary Brown at Alpine Sense
Oh,
last
wonderful.
month, actually. And then we talk about this, and then we talk about the BIPOC guide program a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of interesting. So you were one of the members for the first one, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So can you describe your experience a little bit? And
Yeah.
then because I would think that right now, this is an assumption, so it might not be true. Is so they have their staff guys to do the training, right? So probably it's still pretty hard to staff those guides with, say, affinity guides, like say BIPOC guy, queer guy, or whatever guys there. So did they manage the space well, or probably they have to do some preparation or something like that?
Yeah. I was, so as part of the BIPOC Guide Development Program, I'm so happy you got to talk to Mary. Um, Basically, we had a cohort of 8 folks, most of us Washington based, who went out on a series of field trainings and mentorship and shadow opportunities, as well as like increased certification to support our like mountain and climbing guide um, pathways. It was really fantastic. I had never really been able to be part of a like structured cohort style training like that had such a depth and breadth in scale. Everything from like getting feedback on more efficient like multi-pitch transitions to help prepare me for a rock guide course, to like time um, spent working on glacier transitions and then also getting to like shadow some of the like more bread and butter like volcano summit climbs here in Washington. Like I think that just like structure and exposure and then also the community was a really special part of just making a career in guiding and particularly kind of like more high-end technical guiding feel possible to me. Um, but it definitely is a challenge. I think even having such a large guide staff and so many folks, the amount of people that could be trainers that were also people of color was like very limited. And I know that Mary and the office staff at Alpine Ascents, like beyond their standard DEI training that they have as a base for all of their guides, went through like additional training for folks who wanted to be mentors to people in the program, who wanted to be trainers, to really think about ways that non people of color could best support us and kind of like show up and share those skills. And I really felt that thoughtfulness and that attention from the folks that were trainers. We only had, I don't, I don't want to misrepresent things. So I'm not going to give numbers, but very few of our trainers were actually folks of color who are Alpine Ascend staff members. But I think all of them are really committed to both learning and growing. And I think, as I talked about earlier, like if maybe there is like a sea change that needs to happen around like wanting to come up and develop new guiding practices that are more inclusive, that do address past harm, that we kind of use in affinity spaces. Every single one of those guides that ran trainings with us was really committed to that in their own personal guiding, because like they see it as important. And it was really cool to talk through what those strategies were and also for them to like share and learn. Because I mean, that was like amazing to see too, because I think I have spent a lot of time feeling really alienated and like hurt or confused by like kind of think people like in higher and like more advanced guide tracks. And so to see folks who are pinned guides or like very close to receiving their pins, like so committed to like teaching in different ways, made me really excited about like what is possible like moving forward in the sport. So I think Alpine Ascent handled that really well. It also handled our feedback really well. And I think I have a greater understanding and appreciation for the requisite skills and experience that I would need to like move into guiding glaciated and alpine terrain as someone with primarily a rock background. And I think, preparing me for next level certifications and for my rock guide course. And I think that like also the support is not just like technically do I feel ready, but like emotionally are my goals being supported as well. And I have like felt so much of that from like Mary and the rest of the team, which has been super cool as I pursue other things or here in Washington, and just feeling excited about where things could grow and growing my technical skill set and being able to bring that back to affinity spaces too. So that's been really cool. And I'm like very grateful that Mary and the team of Alpine Ascent kind of like spent so much time, like kind of scheming and thinking through like what a really authentic and well thought out program could be. And that they were able to offer it this summer. It was like completely transformative and was like the highlight. Yeah, really the kind of the highlight, I think, in my professional development last year.
Nice. Yeah, because I was talking with Mary. I mean, I need to make sure I remember it correctly. So, of course, like, she's also a person of color, and I think that she's very motivated to make this happen too because of her identity too. And also I think there's actually, besides that well, in my opinion, it's the right thing to do is to do the DEI work. It's the right thing to do. But for a lot of guy services, like that's not good enough reason because
Yeah.
they still need to have budget, they need to spend money and stuff. But it seems like, according to her, so Alpine has this very big international presence that the the clientele is also getting more diverse. So then you all come back to the soft skill, right? If the guides is all only hang on to the old-fashioned way of dealing with one particular demographic, then there's just not enough tool in their toolbox.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's like even the argument, like if not for like moral, alignment that like supporting increased diversity across industries and definitely in guiding is like a measure to protect the future of the industry. Like as clients become more diverse, as we think about risk management and that expense, um, inclusive guiding practices improve risk management. It opens a wider clientele, a wider base. Like I think of how many folks of color and women and gender nonconforming people feel not connected to the sports and to the industry and like to the guide world. And as guides grow and they have more positive experiences with guides, like that is clientele. Like those are folks who are excited to take part in this. And I think that's something we've really seen that out in the wild where I run like people in partnership as a queer affinity guide service. We focus on like technical climbing guiding and improving like leadership and access for members of the queer community based in the West Coast. Um, I've been able to see that there are folks who have resources and like want to hire guides and want to learn from us and want to like build their skills and do not feel like safe or comfortable or excited to go to a traditional guide service, not because they're not interested in acquiring technical knowledge, but they're worried and concerned about their own like emotional like well-being. Like, is this going to be fun for me? Am I going to learn the things that I want to learn? And are willing to pay and are willing to grow and kind of invest in these things when they see that here. And so I think it's been a huge learning for me to know that like there is a whole like customer base. Um, so I think also too, and sometimes like dollars and cents is what makes the most sense to people sometimes. It's like there's money, there is potential. There is money saved in, improved risk management and like loss mitigation when you think about hiring and developing guides that are, I think, committed to inclusive practices, because I do think that that can happen irrespective of identity. There's plenty of like I've had awesome experiences with folks who are not people of color, who are not women, really kind of wowed me in their commitment to inclusive guide practices, even though they don't hold these identities. And they've shown that like you can really work towards this in the same way that I have also met people of color guides who are like maybe not very interested in inclusive guiding practices or just, bought into kind of what I'll call the old way and proceed. I think that anyone can kind of adopt these. It just happens that right now it is often like women and people of color and like queer guides. But it's those things are not mutually exclusive. And I think there are ways that everyone can commit to growing those practices. And I've been really excited about how I can also learn them too, as someone who is often seen as like having a lot of expertise here. But also I'm learning a lot, particularly in like my inclusion just around like disability and access and like adaptive needs. As well as just always learning from other people about their experiences of like race, ethnicity, gender, and how I can improve like as a guide and educator. So I think
Yeah,
it's something everyone can do.
I think so too, right? Because I'm talking with a lot of guys, and then I mean, well, actually not a lot, but female guys or
Yeah.
non-binary guys that like guiding and like soft skill takes a big part in guiding, right? So I mean, we go to courses, we train our hard skills, but then when you are in the job, you're dealing with people. People is like the first priority. So there's like a lot of soft skills. involved. I just think that probably traditional is like a little bit hard to teach soft skill because it takes a lot of time to develop. And then the hard skill is just like, it's there, so I just
Yeah.
follow the things and it's very easy to measure. Not like soft skill is a little bit hard to know whether are you doing the right thing and not doing the right thing. So maybe but guiding is in service industry, so soft skills certainly have to take a very important part.
Yeah. And I think it's something that we've just not, as an industry, put a lot of weight on those like interpersonal skill development. I think put a lot of emphasis on how hard do you climb, what are your technical skills and abilities, and see that as what makes a good guide and instructor. Where I think you're totally right. Like if those are teachable. I can teach someone, as I think about like doing single pitch instructor like prep, like getting somebody ready to take a course or to take an exam. It's like you can teach someone how to do a pickoff. You can teach them how to build an institutional anchor. You can teach them how to trad climb. And that's a little more discreet than it is how to teach them how to be kind of empathetic and compassionate listeners and thoughtful risk managers. If that's also not what we're taught, is really valuable. We're taught that how hard you climb and what your resume looks like is more important, then we will create a culture where that is more important, um, is as opposed to um, something where we are actually really valuing the way that people show up in a space, their ability to educate. I think it's also kind of why, like the joke of like, just because someone is good at something doesn't mean they're good at teaching it. And I think that's often we have taken some steps to get kind of far removed from that. I'll share just like as an anecdote, is like I'm a newer skier and this is my first season ski instructing. And I have been dealing with a lot of folks who are like very shocked that I am competent at like delivering a lesson or talking to parents or families, to teaching educational concepts, like because I am too new to skiing to like be good at teaching. And I was like, I know how to teach. Like I just now need to know learn the fundamentals of how we teach skiing. But that you can teach me, terminology, the best way to teach movement analysis for skiing. Like I can be taught that. But I have the skills that are required to like help people feel like safe and comfortable and excited to learn. And those things are the way that we're going to be able to teach technical skills. And I think, yeah, it was definitely something I was interested. Someone's like, "Oh, you're really good at that," and I was like, "Yeah, I'm an instructor. Like, I'm just new to teach. I'm just new to teaching skiing." And I remember just kind of dealing with a little bit of some backhanded compliments from like older men who were like, "I've been skiing longer than you've been alive," and I was like, "Well, I I like people and I like listening to them, and that to me feels more important." It's also something that I do when I talk to parents as well. Definitely spent a lot of time teaching little kids, is really trying to stress like those soft interpersonal skills. Like, how is their kid in lessons versus like how close are they to getting into parallel with their skis? Is like, how do they treat other kids in the lesson who are struggling? How do they engage with other people on the mountain? Are they friendly? Are they kind? Like, those things are so much more important. And I want us to put more emphasis on those things. That makes a better skier. You will learn, in time, 5, 6, 7 year olds, they will get to parallel. Like they will start to learn how to link their returns. But I'm also interested not just in those outcomes of like technical skill, but like how we got there. Because there's a world where we all like are really technically proficient, but we're not very kind or thoughtful to each other. And I want to make sure that those two things go hand in hand, that like by being kind and thoughtful, you'll probably be better in lessons and you'll be more fun to ski with. And then it will be more fun that you know how to link your turns because you can go with your friends and play and enjoy and be kind and thoughtful. And so I think that's also something that has been a move in affinity spaces as well, is thinking of not just about outcomes, but the experience. And I spent a lot of time in the instruction side of things too. So thinking about people that are going to go out with their own friend group, their own families, and are they going out and are they staying safe and having fun? first and foremost. And then do they have the technical skills to get there? And then they can grow those. Because I do think we put a lot of emphasis on how well you climb, how fast, how hard, and sometimes we lose the process pieces that affect people's experience of the sport. And remember that these are, at least for guides, yes, the way that we make a living, but for a lot of other people, like their hobbies and their downtime, and how to create more positive relationships to that, so that people have fun hobbies instead of things that generate a lot of stress and anxiety.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the experience is certainly very important, but sometimes I also think that sometimes I feel that, well, like for the climbing, right? You were talking about the people put a lot of emphasis on the difficulty, like how gnarly the climb is, how hard the
Yeah.
climb is, and then sometimes I just wish the climbing doesn't have the grade that
Yeah.
like now I climb for long enough that I know the climbing is not just the grade, but I also deal with a lot of beginners. They just like, oh no, we don't want to climb this five whatever. They want to climb this
Yeah.
five whatever as if that's even though I told them that, well, look, this one is much better climb, even though it's rated a little bit easier. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think that the number thing is a little bit hard to shake it off, like, but
For sure.
yeah.
It's hard. It's hard even for me. I think when I learned to climb too, I was in a community that put a lot of pressure on grades and the performance and behavior. And I have totally internalized some of that. And so even still, I hear that voice in my head about like something, if it's worth climbing. And I think I just started last year really with an emphasis in just trying to be like, is it fun? Did I have fun doing it? Okay, sounds good. Like, and trying to pursue that first. And I actually found that going back to that process made me excited to try harder things again and like
Hmm.
explore my edge, because I was remembering that climbing was fun and not just about like pressuring myself into like being worthy of climbing certain grades. And then I got to a point where I was like, oh, I'm enjoying this so much again. I want to try harder, rather than feeling like that big pressure. But it's something that takes all of us. And what I think is cool about guiding and instructing, as to like why I still do it, or lots of reasons I think it's cool. But is you get to be someone's entry to the sport. You are someone that they look up to. You're someone that has like kind of cultural value and power in terms of like your word. And I think taking that responsibility really seriously and being like, wow, I get to decide how somebody gets introduced to this, and I can try and make it as like positive and open as possible. And especially for those of us who maybe had some early experiences with the sport, and I'll speak for myself here, that like I sometimes look back and I'm like, it's a miracle I still like climbing. Like, oh my gosh, I had some really tough early experiences. And I get to look at people that I teach or that are learning from peer guides who are really committed to these methods, just going like, wow, like they get to learn in such a positive container. This is fabulous. Like, this is really cool. Like, I got to help make sure that like they never got that harmful thing said to them. That like when they learned, it was, encouraging and positive, and risk was managed appropriately. And that is a really special responsibility of guiding and instructing. And I am also just so encouraged to see how quickly people learn and like really thrive in those conditions. And at first I was like upset. I was like, wow, they're like, I've taught people in courses and they're just like light years ahead of where I was at the, like, at their experience level. And then I just realized like, oh, they're learning in such a positive way. Like, that's why they're doing well. That's amazing. And that kind of made me feel excited. And I know I've definitely tapped into tapped into that, even just like learning skiing. Big shout out to Edge PNW. Like, I learned to ski in like a women and gender group of color, like affinity environment. That was like the structure that I gave. And I am so impressed and proud of like where I have gone versus where I was, and how quickly, like, because I had that container, like it is just such a different progress than my climbing journey, because it was so positive all throughout. And I think skiing is even harder to make a positive learning experience, especially as an adult. There's so many barriers and challenges, and Edge and the community that was built through it just kept it so warm that I'm like excited about those challenges. And I realize like how capable I am when I feel really supported and socially accepted and encouraged. And that is really heartwarming to me because I know that, like, okay, that's actually like, that's what I needed. I just needed like support and supportive community and good quality technical instruction. And I could really just take off. And it's okay that I wasn't given that when I learned to climb, but I am working on changing that for other people and I'm working on changing that for myself. And I think we can really, if we care about creating positive relationships to these sports and people that are, maybe do it once or twice and they have a good association or they become like lifelong um, participants, that they do so with like as positive as possible an introduction, and we give everyone kind of a fighting chance to grow the relationship to the sport that is like that most of us as guides instructors have, which is like a really encouraging one. And I hope that everyone can kind of share the value of like wanting to make it all better or like connect people to the thing we all love. So just like what is the best way to do that? Because I think we can all get behind that.
Definitely. Remind me. I just read this book, and there's a quote I remember. They say, "You can't give enough positive reinforcement." So basically, saying
Mm,
that you can always give positive reinforcement as long as it's like genuine. It's not like fake flattering stuff. Then,
yeah.
and somehow they trigger people's motivation to get better. And so I think that's like a good thing there for me to keep in mind myself, because I teach a lot of people too myself, just like always trying to see what they have grown and then give that feedback to them. So it will trigger their own motivation to grow more. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think like just tapping into like at a very base level, like I think about like especially in mountain things, like what are the things that increase risk? The like hungry, angry, lonely, tired. You're like, yeah, like honestly, when I think of like lonely and like this the sense of belonging, like, okay, I can fix the hunger, I can fix the tired, but like a lot of it too is the feeling of like the genuine connection and the ability to kind of connect with others. Like that is such a core need and really inhibits our ability to like deal with anything else. And so you might be like well fed and well rested and but you are still not feeling like part of the group. And how can you possibly undertake this risk in quite the same way or be connected? Like it's very simple to how, and I think that maybe that question is for other people. Is like just how do you cultivate a sense of belonging
Yeah, I
in your groups?
wonder.
And
Yeah. I wonder whether that's like the thing that for people who seek affinity programs, that's the thing that connection part is missing for whatever reason that they try to participate in a more traditional space.
yeah, I I would think so. Like I think it's what a lot of us like crave, and some people feel like they can get that in more traditional spaces. But I think there's a lot of factors that complicate it for especially people who have like many um just kind of like intersecting marginalized identities that make it even like there's even more barriers to that sense of belonging. And so if that's what you want and that's what everyone's really craving, you're like, it's really hard to find it in this like dominant space, or I could go to this affinity space where that's going to be a lot easier for me. And let me maybe start there. And so um, I would love for everyone to feel like they can find that in mainstream spaces, but I'm also a big believer in like pluralism. Like there's lots of ways to achieve it. So maybe they find it in this like mainstream space, maybe find it in affinity space. At the end of the day, if this is something that people want to connect to, climbing, outdoor recreation, in this way, my hope is that they just find belonging in some way, and that belonging isn't at the expense of anyone else's like exclusion or like discrimination or humiliation. Like if we can do that, maybe it's with climbers of color, maybe it's with that on the wild, maybe it's with edge, maybe it's with any of the other amazing programs that have happened here, or it's just with a group of friends. Like either way, I think I can feel happy knowing that that's being achieved. But I do think that these community and affinity spaces really like bring people together in a way that facilitates that and kind of trains us away from maybe some of the individualism that we see to more of like spaces of like shared belonging, which can be pretty cool.
And so what do you see yourself, say, in the medium term, maybe 3 or 5 years?
Yeah, the medium term 3 or 5 years. I hope I'm still doing all these things that I've had. I want to have more fun climbing. That is definitely a goal of mine. I do right now. I'm someone who sees like advanced certifications as expanding my ability to work in more terrain, in more community groups. So I would love to have completed my rock guide course and be like moving through that pathway, taking some of my like early, um, Alpine guide track courses, and then also um, moving through kind of in the snow world. I really do appreciate the PSIA, Professional Ski Instructors for America, in terms of certification for like movement analysis and training. It feels really discrete to me, so would like to be able to advance there to be able to teach in more affinity programs across disciplines and really kind of round that out. And my hope is that I am not running as many things that I am a few years, maybe I'll be in my early 30s. I'm 26 now, that I will have kind of aged out of running so many things so young, and that there will be so many people that can do the jobs and occupy the roles that I have had. I think that is my short-term hope, that I am able to like build up the leadership and training and credentials of others, that there are more of us and I kind of organize myself out of having a job, and I can just go back and run less programs and do some more guiding and show up in that way. I think that would be really, really cool. I think I am trying to put more emphasis on, yes, gaining those skills, but like maintaining the process of like that this all still feels good. Over, I have my like discrete, like, oh, I'd really love to ski this, or I'd love to climb that route. But mostly is like maintaining that feeling while I climb, because I had previously seen myself get really wrapped up in the outcomes. And then I would climb a route, but be honest, just be miserable the whole time and just be like, well, I climbed the route. And I was like, sucked. You didn't like who you went with. You honestly like tried most of it. Like it felt hard. It felt crappy. Like, is that worth it? Like, would you have rather just done something else and like been happy than do the thing that you felt like you had to do because it was like on a tick list? So I'm trying to like, I have my quiet list of things I'd really, really love to do. But my real hope is that I'm still pursuing um, objectives that and partnerships that feel really good and are really exciting over just, climbing a certain grade. Um, so and recovery as I get older. I hope that I am better at recovery. This last couple of months. I am in my recovery era. I'm realizing that I'm not 21 anymore. So I hope in a couple of years I'm training in a way that like keeps me keeps me moving.
Nice. And I'm wondering whether you have the similar thought. Like for me, I just wish that in a few years that the affinity program is not that crucial anymore.
Yeah.
Meaning that, it's we will have a
Yeah.
space that overall is like safe.
Yeah. I mean, that's like my sincerest hope is that they are not essential. They're present, but they are not essential. They're not a refuge from mainstream climbing culture, but rather are just a complement to it and a space that people can find themselves in, but they don't need to kind of flee or escape or like hide from anything. Because there's opportunities for like, yeah, authenticity throughout. So that's really my hope, is that we're able to continue to grow those opportunities. And I can't wait to see all the folks who are growing their like certifications and trainings and skills to be able to run them in the future.
Yeah, because you mentioned that you also work in some non-affinity space. So do you think that you will go work there or you would naturally work there when the affinity program is not that crucial.
Yeah, I think for right now, I feel really excited that I have built enough of a technical skill set and confidence in myself that I can enter like non-affinity programs and be taken seriously. That I have, like the credential to like, I don't know, not hide behind, but like defend, being like, this is Soph, and they know a few things. And people kind of trust that. I think it's been really cool. It's also, I think for me, been really refreshing to teach in some of those settings where I maybe don't have as many immediate, obvious points of connection with my participants or clients, but I still can connect. Like, I think that to me has also been really exciting, is to see that and to understand that I still am able to do that. Like, even in a non-affinity setting, I have the skills and the ability to connect with people, to build rapport, to deliver, teaching outcomes. Like, I really like that. And I think it has helped remind me of that the more time I spend in non-affinity spaces, being like, I'm good at teaching. I'm good at building rapport. Like, it can be done. And that also that we collectively have a capacity to like seek to understand each other and like make connections, even if we don't have um, as many obvious points of commonality. So I think that's really cool. And I would like to be able to also contribute to changes in guiding and instructing kind of in the mainstream by just being present. So I would like to be able to like continue to grow in that arena too, because I do think something I worry about sometimes is just siloing myself professionally only in affinity spaces. Well, that feels really good for me. And I like love the spaces, and it feels like I'm always happy to go to those work days that I might not be able to affect as much change in like mainstream culture by only working in affinity spaces. So when I go to these like more traditional guiding and teaching opportunities, I do feel like I'm able to help bring the perspective of affinity spaces into that. And then other people are like, oh, like another way is possible, like another world is possible. And I can kind of build those changes throughout. So I do see myself continuing to work professionally, like in some non-affinity spaces, especially as I want to grow my professional career. Um, and just thinking about like new terrain, new opportunities. So that is something that I do see in my future. But I want to make sure I bring those lessons from affinity work with me.
Cool. And I usually ask these two questions. So first question is, don't overthink it. Just
Yeah.
answer right away that what is your proudest moment?
My proudest moment. Um, yeah, this last summer, with my little brother, aforementioned little brother, Julian, big little brother. He like towers over me now, but he's my baby brother. Um, and we were in Squamish together, and it was his first time in Squamish, and we like swung late on the Spirit of Squamish. And I think we just like got to the top pretty fast. And I was like, cool, you're a cool climbing partner. And he's like, you're a cool climbing partner. And I think I was just really proud that I have worked to like repair this relationship with my brother, and that we have this connection as adults that we can share with one another, and like enjoy a beautiful day in like one of my favorite places. I'm like just really proud that that is important to me still in my climbing, instead of like pursuing things that maybe are like technically harder or like, morally, like I can enjoy just like a really fun multi-pitch with my little brother. And I'm proud that that feels good. It's probably something I didn't think was possible a couple of years ago. So no thinking answer.
And is this brother the brother you were talking about at the very beginning?
At the very beginning, yeah, my little brother who's also a climbing guide and mountain biking instructor, and he works as he's a shop manager at his REI's like bike and ski shop. So we've both incidentally found our way to like outdoors world, not necessarily kind of coming from that as kids. So I think
I
that's
mean,
cool.
did you two influence each other, your career choice, or you just happened that way?
Um, yeah, he says that I influenced him, like just choosing those opportunities and like taking him out climbing. That I have, if he listens to this, he has told me and he's told other people that he did it because of me. Um, Classic older sibling, but I think that's really cool. And he influences just his ethic for like training and growing and like learning new skills has really influenced me. Um, yeah, he's so meticulous and it makes me want to be like continue to practice that in my own teaching.
Nice. And then another question is, if the listeners can only take one thing away from this podcast, what would you want them to take away?
Yeah, I think if they can only take away one thing, is that I have found it is incredibly rich to like question the way that we have done things and throw it all out and come up and just know that there is probably a better way and a better world and a better possibility. And so my hope is that people listen to this and are thinking about maybe things in climbing or other parts of their life that maybe don't necessarily feel like they work and know that it is entirely possible to try new things and new ways. And that's often really rewarding. And I hope that is a takeaway. It is totally possible to throw out, re-examine, and like try something new and make pivots when we have more info.
Yeah, definitely. If something become a dogma, maybe a revolution is needed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that would be my hope.
Yeah, great. Anything else you want to talk about?
Um, no, just that I'm like so appreciative. Yeah, like I said, long time listener, first time caller. It's been really cool to hear all these profiles, um, of just like fantastic folks that you've talked to, and yeah, listening to them while I'm like running or like skating up somewhere is like a little bit of like motivation and thought, and it's really cool to. Yeah, I think at first I was like, why me? I'm probably among the younger, least credentialed. And it's really cool to just be able to share and like be in that space. I think it's really, really cool.
I
So
mean,
thanks
I
for
mean,
all you're
everybody
doing.
gotta have something to share, right? So
Yeah.
it's not just about how hard you climb or how old you are, right? So we all come from
Yeah.
very different background. I mean, you have something, a lot of things I don't even understand probably, like um, your heritage and like I have no idea. Like I don't in that part I say, like you say your dad's from Haiti, is that
Yeah.
right? I was just like I only read about it in the book, but I have no idea that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then your mom is from Chile. That was like really cool. And I was like, oh, I went to Coake too. Yeah,
Yeah. I would love to hear another time. Yeah, your trips to Coyhaique. It's such a special and magical place and it's hard to forget. So
it is. Yeah. So this winter you're not going back. I mean, are you planning to go
I
back?
I'm planning, my hope is that I can go back like next boreal fall, like austral, like spring. So like October, November maybe. Um, but yeah, wanted to give myself a full winter in the Northwest to kind of focus on skiing and,
Nice.
you know, pursuing, like airy pathways and stuff like that. So it's a bit of an investment in me to kind of stay put. And also just I'm feeling really rooted in Washington and wanting to not leave and just kind of maybe plant some seeds and like, build relationships with like, I think at first it felt like maybe I'm just here for a little bit and now I really feel kind of all in on a new home. So wanting to just be really present and spend time like skiing with people that I don't get to hang out with and having dinner with friends and training with folks and um yeah, building the relationships that are going to like support all
Yeah.
the fun mountain shenanigans and guiding that will come. So,
Yeah. Nice. Well, yeah. Thank you so much for coming to the show. Yeah.
yeah, thank you for having me.